Good afternoon, and welcome to the Cloud on Air Customer Heroes. I know you all have a choice of how and with whom you spend your time. Thanks for choosing to spend your time with us today. My name is Jagan, and I lead the API management stack for Google Cloud. Every day, we witness a changing world. In my interaction with business leaders, there are three topics that represent a common theme. The CEOs and CIOs are generally worried about being digitally flanked because every day there's someone with a new idea who can potentially disrupt business and change the landscape. Companies who think of themselves as platform companies are likely to be the front runners. Being a platform company is not just restricted to technology, but applies just as much to a bank, telco, or a retail business. And the third thing is if building a platform business is not a choice, then embracing and participating in an ecosystem is key to progress. Now, in an ever-changing business world, it poses an innovation dilemma to the CEO and CIO. Let's take a look at some of the challenges it poses and the conversations that we at Google have with our customers. The CEOs and CXOs are constantly thinking about their growth strategy, what their growth strategy should be. Do they protect existing share of the wallet? Or should they be thinking about disrupting their own existing business model, lest somebody else does it? Should they be redefining their distribution model? One question that they grapple with is around unbundling of services. Just like the music industry did many years ago, moving from a CD with 10 songs was a choice of customers today who can get to pick and choose songs to build their own albums. Why shouldn't that model apply to a bank or a telco? So the second part is how do customers accelerate revenue and improve customer experiences through a broad set of channels? One example that I would like to share is that of AccuWeather, who monetize their APIs by treating them as products. They offer a free, freemium, and a premium model to drive customer choice that's opened up new avenues for revenue growth. The last but not the least is around building partnerships and participating in multiple ecosystems where your app is not the center of customer acquisition and business growth. Now let's come to the CIO challenges. The CIO challenges is often how IT can contribute to solving the challenges of the CEO and bridge the chasm, so to speak, that exists today. The CIO is constantly challenged with the burden of legacy versus modernizing application and infrastructure to enable new business models and ecosystem play. They're also thinking about how do I make sure I leverage data to drive insights to aid better decision making? How do CIOs think about application modernization, the use of microservices? And how do we all do this? Do they have to choose on-prem? Should it be on cloud? Or should they choose a hybrid model? An effective API management platform and strategy will provide answers to both these dilemmas. It is our privilege as Google and Apigee to partner with Macquarie Bank on their digital transformation journey. Today, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce and welcome Rajay Rai, the head of digital engineering, to show you all how an API-first approach has helped Macquarie Bank become one of the leading digital banks in the world. Rajay.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jag. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Rajay Rai, and I work in banking and financial services. I look after digital engineering there. We are a digital bank, and we have one branch and one branch only, which is in the slide right in front of you. There's a building in 1 Shelley Street, and that's our headquarters in Sydney, and that's the only branch that we have. Now, we are competing against the last mobile application that you might have used. That could be Netflix, Spotify, or Facebook. These digital oil companies are really setting the bar high when it comes to great experiences. And we wanted to be earning our spot in the home screen of our customers. Today, I'm going to take you through our digital architecture at a high level. We'll talk about the role, the key role the API management layer plays in helping us be one of the leading digital banks in Australia. Just quickly about Macquarie Group. We operate in about 28 countries, have over 15,000 employees, and we have 4 key divisions: our working, banking, and financial services, which is the retail arm of the business. Now, today, we live in the 4th industrial revolution, and it's all about the fast fish that eats the slow fish. It's a great quote from Klaus Schwab, and it's relevant here because it's all about speed. Speed is of essence here. You've got to be able to move from idea to value in a compressed time frame. In terms of flexibility, we've got to think about architecture. We've got to think about how the architecture can evolve. And we need to do this at speed and at scale and on demand, because things are constantly changing in our ecosystem. In fact, change is the only constant that's happening around us. Last but not the least, it's important to understand that, connectivity is the new loyalty. Today, devices are connected all the time. It's all about being always on all the time, which means you're building new relationships and maintaining your old relationships using mobile experiences, follow you anywhere kind of strategies with applications, a continuous experience, and most importantly, data. We need to make sure that data is working harder and harder for our customers. And most importantly, when you talk about architecture, architecture needs to be able to deliver 3 things: speed, flexibility, connectivity. And it needs to be in a perpetual state of evolution. That's fundamental for us to understand today. So let's talk about where we were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had applications running in silos. They were, of course, traditional monolithic applications. And these applications are very, very tightly coupled to an experience. Yes, they are rich in feature, right? But they are only tightly coupled to a specific experience. You cannot have that experience spanned across various devices. You can't have that extended across the boundaries of the enterprise, and it's very limited in scope. However, it does give you a lot of operational simplicity. But agility-wise, we would take about 3 to 6 months to make a release of any kind or a change of any kind. So of course it was slow, and that did not meet our expectations. It did not meet the business expectations of change and agility. Now, when you think about where we are going today, on your right side, you think about fit-for-purpose applications, where you don't need to worry about who the consumer is anymore. It's about accommodating these new paradigms and models. We had to rethink our entire financial UI experience. And it was all about taking simple data and making sure we took complex data and made them into simple interactions that are highly consumable and intuitive for our users. And on the right side, far right, you can see there's a partner app. So once you start building such applications, they're loosely coupled. You want the experience tied to an API. No longer do you have an experience tied to a web application. You have an experience tied to an API, and the customer journey now is driven by the flexibility and the granularity of your APIs. I will talk more about that, and when you move into that world of microservices, there are new considerations, there are new complexities that you need to manage in your architecture. So coming to Where we decided to go from the siloed applications, we decided to go with a single page web application where we could take support all our businesses. But not only support all our businesses, what we wanted to consider was support a multi-experience API channel, and also think in terms of, can we support a call center? Can we support devices that are known to us today? And the only way you could do that is going towards a RESTful architectural strategy. And a good example I have here is we spent about 3-4 years building out one transaction API for our entire retail bank. That would mean your business banking, your personal banking, and your wealth management have one and only one API for transaction. And we've been able to unify all of that and extend beyond just the known consumers, but also the unknown. Having implemented patterns such as OAuth 2, it allows us to extend these boundaries beyond what we know today. It could be devices, it could be messaging chatbots tomorrow, but we are extendable and we had to accommodate that. So we've taken that approach of having an API management layer to help us transform our entire experience for the organization. Let's talk a little more about how we got there. Our capability to execute has grown exponentially over the last few years. We can deploy software in minutes and seconds in a secure and controlled manner. We are regulated, and hence, it's imperative that we meet all the expectations of regulators in respect to software release life cycle, processes, and procedures. So in the last 5 years, we moved from the left side, from monolithic applications to mini applications, mini services, microservices, introduced data platform, which I'll talk about more in detail. We launched our experimentation platform. However, the immutable infrastructure was not allowing us to scale. So we had to move towards mutable infrastructure on the cloud, move into containers, API gateways, introduce that, because you cannot manage your microservices without a graceful way to manage your traffic and shape your traffic in a secure manner. And finally, I would like to say here that we are now a containerized digital bank. And that enables us to have multiple environments and build in parallel. A good example would be the speed of innovation, the pace of innovation that it unleashed. We were the first bank in Australia to have open APIs, and we launched that in about 3 to 6 months' time, only because we had microservice strategies and an API gateway to help that with, of course, cloud-native strategies. We have built out a responsive digital platform. Now, let me clarify something. I'm going to focus only on the technology side of it and the architectural side of it today. However, your platform also comprises of people and processes. Culture is a fundamental part of how an organization needs to transform. However, let's focus on the architectural side of the digital platform. To be responsive, to be agile, you've got to rethink everything from the ground up, and that's what we did. From the bottom, we have the system of record that's advertising services, pushing events onto the layers above using Kafka, using Solace queues, and in some cases batch files, depending on the maturity level of those system of records. And it moves into a highly performant data store with low latency reads and writes. We use Cassandra, which is a wide column family, which of course traces this bloodline back to big table, and it's a wide column family. It can scale out, we can replicate data. In fact, that's exactly the technology used by Apogee as well. That's something that is interesting for us also, and something that we were comfortable with in terms of the architecture of Apogee as our API gateway. Now, the data store has other technologies as well. We have graphs, Redis for in-memory caching. We've got in-memory processing as well, distributed compute capabilities with Spark, Solace for full text search. And graphs is really important because we found that we needed to map a 360 view of our clients, and that was one of the best ways to do that. All of this is running on Kubernetes. Above the layer, we've got domain-specific services, built-in microservices. We bundle them up and provide more and more functionality for our consumers. And again, that entire stateless services run on Kubernetes. Right on top, we've got the API management layer, which is run, of course, with Apigee. And that's the gateway for all the channels to connect to us. If you think about it, we've got Salesforce connecting to us. You make a phone call, it connects to us. Co-browsing, you've got a problem in e-banking, you want to co-browse. It's all enabled by the API layer. We've got white label clients, over 20 of them. They're all, again, using the same strategy. We've got open APIs, as I mentioned before, portals for our citizen developers, and web and mobile experiences as well. I would like to say here that we've standardized on the OAuth2 protocol, made sure that it's flexible, it's headless. You would kind of put this architecture and say that this is what you would be thinking about in terms of modern day architecture. It's a meshed architecture underneath, enabled by an API gateway. Now, it's important, context is important. As you take data from the bottom, you've got data coming in raw format, turns into information, knowledge, wisdom, power. The higher you go, the more powerful it gets. The more you interact with the data, the more powerful it gets. So this is where we like the customers to put in their tagging on the records, on the transaction records. The customers can enrich the transactions as they wish. They can attach receipts. All that, again, is done due to the fact that we have a simple way to access all these services using a simplified view with an API gateway. Now, the next part of this is to get to understand why we did this. It's all about making sure you can run this two-speed economy. From the layer of your event architecture, event-based integration architecture and above, that layer, you can actually make multiple releases as many times as you want, right? Multiple times in a day. And below that, you have a slower cadence. In many cases, it's referred to as a bimodal architecture. Maybe you could call that. But we are a containerized bank, agnostic to the cloud provider that we run in because of adopting Kubernetes as a strategy. As an organization, one of the good things about using Kubernetes and of course Apigee as a gateway is you have the ability to package up environments, end-to-end environments, and you can direct traffic as you please for your partners. You can manage the versions really well. You can bleed traffic across. A good example here is we've got an experimentation platform, and I like to say this because we have a thematically sealed environment for maybe 100 developers in the digital world, in our digital team. And what we do is enable people to make constant releases into lab, right from data, if you remember the architecture, right from the data, stateful data layer to our stateless services, and up with your API gateway, we can snap an entire environment for experimentation. Like that, we could have different environments. Let's say you're working with 3-4 features, you could have 3-4 environments which are production-like, but isolated. The blast radius is isolated, and we could test and learn as we go. So experimental capital is really important. When you're thinking of being a digital bank, when you're thinking of a digital ecosystem, you've got to be able to move fast, and that is what is a secret sauce for us to experiment and learn. The next stage we have is beta. So beta is when you have your internal customers, your external customers that are invited for early releases, and you've got your internal staff that's testing your early releases as you go. And again, you can make as many releases as you want in beta. These are all controlled environments and regulated, by the way. So they're audited, they are in production, and of course, last but not least is production. As you can see there, we got various examples of how this works. You could have production running, for example, in an end-to-end environment for personal banking called version 1.9, personal banking 2.1 being used by beta, and lab could be on 2.2 that's constantly changing. and then you could decide that the production, you're happy with beta, so production data now could be pointing to version 2.1. And that's a traffic shaping capability that the API gateway gives you. It enables you to do progressive probability routing and also user-based routing. So your response time for problems is much faster. Again, you could set up an environment that say, let's say you had a problem somewhere in production, a bug that you want to fix. You could release an environment and say, this is version 3 of personal banking. And you could say, Rajesh traffic now, I have a front end. I want that traffic to be shaped and moved to this new environment called version 3. And when you're happy with it, you flick the traffic across. That degree of flexibility is what you need when you're building out a digital bank and you're thinking about experimentation. Now I'm going to take you through some rich experiences that we built and try and correlate how the API gateway helps facilitate experiences for us. Travel detection. When you land in Spain, the example here is you land in Spain, we know the customer has spent a lot of effort and energy saving up for a trip, and you land in Spain, you want to work on the emotional side of the client and say, hey, can I help you with something? And you'd say, would you like to check your foreign exchange currency? For that, you could use some best of breed services, whip up a front end something like in a few days or weeks, rather than spend months trying to integrate that. And most of the services that you get in the marketplace today are available on sign up. You go there, get a client ID, and broker it using the API management layer. And you could build that in a compressed time frame rather than spend weeks on building this. So brokering an API is a typical example here. But you know, the wallpaper there is a good example. So when I landed here, in Singapore, Gardens by the Bay popped up on my wallpaper. How great is that? So it's important that we are feeding off the client's emotions and we're saying, what can we do for you? We want to be present with you. And building these contextual-based applications are really, really heart of what the business does really well. Now, natural language processing, when you call a bank, what do? You speak in a natural language. When we started building experience-based APIs, we said we want to start architecting from the outside in, which is you start thinking about talking to a customer, right? You call the bank and you say, how much did I spend in last Christmas? Or I don't know where this transaction was spent, and you're trying to find some more information about it. So it's important to find out and help the client with that contextual search. And here's a good example. How much did I spend in golf around Wollongong? And we have natural language processing APIs that we've been building over the past few years, and they're very rich at the moment. As you can see there, as an example, you can see the proximity-based map out there that comes up and says, hey, we've got 3 places that you've been playing in golf around a proximity of 8 or 10 kilometers to where I live. That's in Warringah in Sydney. And the same APIs can service multiple experiences. Again, on the screen, you can see that the mobile provides that information for you. We have many other capabilities like tagging your transaction, hashtag golf with hashtag family. You could do facet-based searches. And another good example of how the API management layer might help is you might have open APIs where you do not want to expose some kind of search capabilities. You might want to monetize that in future. So the API management layer makes you build once, use many. You can package up your products and monetize them if required in future. We don't do that today, but it's a possibility that these capabilities could be explored in future. And again, putting the customer first means that the natural language search capability could be integrated with chatbots, could be integrated with Amazon Home, Google. Anything could consume that. Any device could consume our services. We've done that. We've just not released them. It depends on when we make a decision on making those releases and when it's prioritized. Now, white label clients. We have many white label clients. As I mentioned, we are a digital bank, over 20 of them, and it's a fairly difficult ecosystem to manage. You can imagine when you're dealing with so many different white label clients, it's hard to direct traffic to various versions of your services, and then gracefully, sunset some of them, migrate some of them, migrate some features that you might decide should exist in your white label partner or shouldn't exist. And then you've got to think about all the white label mobile solutions that you provide. And that adds on yet another degree of complexity. So this is where you think about, how do you handle this? How would an API management layer handle this? You could have your single page web apps surfaced up through your Node.js applications, your Node.js containers. Every time you build something, you could throw that in there. And you could have, for example, a UI for a white label point just to that container. And that UI for that specific white label partner could be pointing to a version like, for example, 2.2, and so on and so forth. And the context pods that you create are all managed via the key value stores in Apogee. Good example there would be, I could set up something that says lab.x/raj, and it could point somewhere. That's the degree of flexibility that it provides you with microservices architecture and the API gateway. It's a marriage made in heaven. The Authenticator is a good example again of how we have been able to innovate at speed and come up with some of these experiences that you see in front of you. We've got multi-factor authentication APIs that we can use as a pattern across all the solutions that we provide. It's an extra degree of security. It's an extra degree of experience that we think is important to provide to our customers. The customers can now choose the kind of security levels they want to have for protecting their transactions. So once you make a transaction, you get a push notification and you could approve the transaction. It's a first of its kind in Australia at the moment. And you've got to be thinking about where we could go with this, right? You could say, hey, I would like, your credit card is due, would you like to pay your minimum amount? So this is how innovative we can get because of the fact that we have one API gateway and an API management layer that's orchestrating all of our traffic from all the devices. With all the devices managed and watched, it allows us to have a mesh of devices. And we're consistently building these experiences. As you can see there, similar to Apple or Google, these are the kind of experiences that these digital oil companies are building. So you approve a transaction from one device, you get a message on all the devices where you have the authenticator running, and silently, if you've approved it from one, the other device is aware of that solution and it goes away. So I'm showing you an example of continuous experience across devices. This is where experience is going. You might start a payment from your mobile and finish on the web. These are the kind of experiences that you want to be building in future. The open APIs, we were the first bank to have launched open APIs in late 2017. And since then, we've had Pocketbook, which is PFM. And what they do is aggregate data from across all financial institutions. What we've done is we care about our customers. The customers are the most important things for us. The security of our customers come first, always and every time. And hence we've said that it's our responsibility to make sure that we are doing the best by our customer. We want to be doing the right thing. And when a customer logs in, the credentials don't need to be exposed or stored anywhere with a third party. We provide tokens using three-legged OAuth strategies and thereby enabling the customer to decide which services, which bank accounts, which accounts do they want to surface on Pocketbook, as an example. And not only that, you could go further and say, hey, I now want to disconnect this account. I don't want to see this account in Pocketbook. My mortgage account does not need to go to Pocketbook. You could control that at a granular level. Again, we could not have done that without thinking about our customers and thinking about the multi-experience API approach that we've taken. You could be the leading digital bank. However, you need a front door so developers can open it. And this is a new paradigm that we believe in. We think that accessibility breeds innovation. And we really wanted to make sure that we can do the best by the citizen developers. And we built a sandbox. You can see the URL. Please, we invite you to try it out and let us know what you think about it. You can leave a comment there. It's open. Again, all of these experiences that you see here has been possible because of our API journey that we've been on for the past few years. I'd now like to summarize and our discussion here and start with saying that the API management layer allows us to create a symphony of digital services. And when we say that, it allows us to do modular experimentation, traffic space shaping, which I discussed. Another good thing that it has is the ability to manage many channels. You build once, run many. A huge advantage in terms of architecture to be headless. Improved developer experience. And I cited and I showed you what you could do with the developer portal. And you could integrate with best of breed services. You could integrate with Salesforce, build your front-end experiences. You could have calculators, Forex. You could integrate with Google Maps. We could give you an example of Google Maps. Again, that's again a very good example of brokering. We could forge new business relationships. You have many white label clients. It's a huge attraction, the experience that we built. And it gracefully allows you to manage your microservice architecture. Your meshed architecture is very complex to manage if you do not have an API management layer. You'd have to whip it up yourself, and it's going to create a lot of complexity. And most importantly, it allows us to move at the speed of now. Architecture needs to be evolutionary. And an architecture of this kind, a modern architecture of this kind, allows us to be in a perpetual state of evolution. It allows us to be moving at the speed of now and delivering whatever the business requires. We have to be ahead of the business. Now, I'd like to say here that at Macquarie, we continue to dream in months, plan in days, and ship in seconds. Now, thank you so much. Please stay tuned for some Q&A that we'll be back shortly.
Rajay, it's been an absolute privilege. Thank you for the partnership.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
Just a couple of questions, Rajay. Today, you talked a lot about onboarding many technology partners. right, to build and participate in an ecosystem. This must have driven some level of complexity. Can you provide some guidance for anyone who's looking to onboard partners without losing any of the veracity of internal and external governance?
I think, the first and foremost, we must understand that the complexity in the architecture, right, will always pull you back. And we recognized that 5 years ago, where you could not innovate. I mean, leave aside, innovating outside. You can't even innovate from an experience perspective without having thought about how you can interact with devices of any kind.
Yeah.
If you had a complex ecosystem where you had different strategies to service every channel, your costs would increase. So the moment you decide that you want to be on an OAuth 2 path, right, which is a headless architecture, you decide that you're going to be agnostic of the consumer, that will automatically drive simplicity in your architecture. And then you start thinking about an outside-in approach. So everything suddenly opens up. All doors open up for you. And you've seen that. You got open APIs. You can onboard with sandboxes. You can look at bringing new businesses on board. You have partners building their own solutions, and sometimes across verticals. All of these solutions could not have been done without thinking in terms of simplicity. You can go to almost any business partner and connect up with them without a problem. So our job from an architectural perspective is to provide that flexibility for a business.
That's awesome. You also talked a little bit about how Macquarie is an everything API bank, right? Can you double click a bit on this and share the business benefits and API first strategy as had for you?
Yes, of course. One thing I must say here is, you've seen the kind of experiences that we've been building. Right? We've got business banking, personal banking, and wealth. And when we started, like I said, we were running in silos. We had many duplications of our services. The moment we start saying that we'll have an API approach from an outside in, a good example again would be the transaction API. We said we want one API. When you go to Google, you don't say, give me a map API and you get 10 of them. You get one Google Map API, right? And it's about making sure that the complexity is hidden behind the API. So it's challenging from an architectural perspective, right? But then once the business is on board, the architectural team is on board, and this is the way of working, it kind of makes it simpler for you to churn out different APIs. You start with one, get the principles right, and then you can start churning them out at will. And what's interesting is the outcome is the experience. You've seen the experience. It is amazing because of the fact that we understood that we've got to trust the headless architecture. You cannot always think of the future, right? You cannot. The future just keeps moving around, changing every few months. So in order to adapt, you've got to think about an API first. An API is the internet. There's a famous saying out there, right? The API is the internet. And one of the fastest growing APIs, right, categories is financial services. I don't know if you've seen it in programmable web. It's amazing. It's growing so fast. So we've got to be there for our clients. We've got to be there for a business. We've got to be able to take these assets that we build for these businesses, make sure they're reusable, and connect to known and unknown value streams in the future. So I believe that, we've done right by the business, and we always think about how we can help our customers build better security. You saw the push notification strategies that we have. Excellent. The open APIs where we are thinking in terms of our accessibility for citizen developers. And our job is to be prepared for the future. And that's what we constantly are doing.
Rajay, that's exceptional. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Action.
Awesome. And is there someone from Google that is also going to be moderating the
Absolutely.
session?
So actually kicking that off will be Sungwoo Lee. He is the account manager for Netmarble. He'll be talking about specifically how Google Cloud is helping Netmarble and Netmarble's journey before Duke Kim then comes on and talks about the specifics around AI. Duke Kim is the head of AI at Netmarble, and he will be telling you about the anomaly detection services they're using and how they maintain those models.
A quick welcome back to all those who were actually attending our track 2, which was digital banking with APIs. I'm sure you enjoyed the session as much as Jay and I did, and you are ready to explore Apigee or open APIs for your next digital transformation within the bank. For track 2, what's coming up next is enterprise-wide collaboration and innovation with G Suite. And this session will actually be conducted by Anna Tang, who is the Senior Business Development Manager International for Cheetah Mobile. And with her would be Fiona Chan, who is Head of Marketing Strategy and Innovation at Singapore Press Holdings. So again, a very interesting discussion lined up about G Suite, and that will be actually moderated by Michael Lundgren, who is our Senior Director for Product Marketing for G Suite.
Great. So please keep those questions coming throughout the sessions. We do have live experts standing by ready to assist and participate in the community. And what about social?
Absolutely. I was going to jump on that next. Our Twitter handle for today is #Google Cloud Heroes. So make sure you tune in and participate in the global conversation that's happening on social media.
Great. So choose your track and enjoy your session.